You know, every time my family makes its way over here to the Avenue, either for a meal or if Amy needs to run into a store to pick something up, somehow I always find my way into Dick's Sporting Goods because there's always something here that I need. You know, and really obviously don't need it. I have more junk than I could ever use, but I tell you what really gets me is when I go back into the sporting goods section or really the outdoor section, I look at the fishing lures. I mean, no matter how many I have, there's always something that looks good to me there. And usually it's something that somebody said they caught a fish on this lure and I don't have one, so I have to have it, and I never catch anything on it, but you know what, I own it now. And I was thinking about that the other day. What are lures? They're just imitations. They're just really a shadow of the real thing, meant to kind of fool and trick fish. As I was thinking about this as it relates to our Hebrews study, I know some of you are thinking that's a little bit of a stretch, and I'll give you that. But Hebrews chapter 8 is an incredible chapter because it really drills down deep into the core of what this whole section is about, that Jesus Christ is better. He is supreme over all the shadows of really the Old Testament. Now, here's something that's really important. You can lose sight of this as you begin to study deeper in the book of Hebrews. You see, especially in chapter 8, we're kind of looking back at the tabernacle and looking back at the sacrificial system. It's not that they were wrong. It's just that they were incomplete. They were shadows of the ultimate reality that would be fulfilled when Jesus Christ, the ultimate high priest, came onto the scene. And now chapter 8 has three key points that I don't want you to miss today as you study inside your group, because what it shows us is the new deal, the new covenant, what Jesus Christ came to bring, and why it is better than the old system. Now, of these three things, here's the first thing you need to look at. First of all, God's law will become an inner principle stamped on our heart, the writer of Hebrews says, not on tablets of stone like God gave to Moses, that each and every one of us can carry those around, that God begins to work on the inside of us, and we're motivated by His Holy Spirit, and it's not something that only a select few could see. And that's a difference that we have in the new covenant. The second thing the writer of Hebrews says is sin is going to be once and for all completely destroyed. Now, the Old Testament sacrificial system was just a daily system. In fact, if you lived in Jerusalem, very early in the morning, if you lived anywhere around, you made your way anywhere around the temple, you would hear the sound of sacrifices being offered by the priest over and over and over again. Now, one of the things I think that is interesting here, even though that was a temporary system, even though that had to be done time and time again, if nothing else, when a family would bring, or when a father would bring an animal to the priest to be sacrificed for his sin, I mean, there was an understanding that something had to be paid for this wrong that I committed in my life. And so for that understanding, I think that's something that we've lost in the contemporary church, that Jesus paid that ultimate price. But the reality that the writer of Hebrews is saying, the reason that Jesus is better is because once and for all, sin can be completely dealt with. In fact, he begins chapter 8 reminding us that the high priest Jesus is seated, meaning completed work. The sacrificial system has been completely satisfied through the gift of Jesus Christ on our behalf. Now, the third reality the writer of Hebrews deals with in chapter 8, he says that we can move into an age of uninterrupted fellowship with God. You know, as you think about the Old Testament system and really the Old Testament story, there was times of just God's movement and periods of God's movement upon the nation of Israel, but it was really interrupted fellowship. In fact, when the New Testament begins, there had been 500 years of silence. From the time of the book of Malachi to Matthew, there's 500 years when God doesn't speak. So we have this interrupted time of fellowship with God. But not so with us in the New Covenant. The Holy Spirit of God, the very presence of God, comes to dwell inside of us. Not in the Holy of Holies, not in a very limited sphere, but inside our life. And this is what the writer of Hebrews wants us to take a look at and see how much greater this new relationship is than what was there in the old system. Now, I want us just to move just for a second to think about our own personal lives and just think about real practical terms. And this is what I'm really hoping is taking place inside your groups, because as we are spending time with each other, talking about the text, dealing with it, hopefully you're beginning to feel more and more comfortable with each other, opening up and sharing struggles, sharing difficulties, sharing fears and doubts and frustrations you've had along your journey. You see, one of the things that I think the book of Hebrews really does is drill down to this issue. If I'm ever going to leave something in my past, if I'm ever going to leave a habit or a stronghold or something that I'm really hung up with in my own personal life that I need to leave, I need to understand that there's a far greater reality that I can give myself to. And it's when I understand in a more comprehensive way the reality of who Jesus Christ is and what He's come to do in my life, then I have a far easier time leaving the past and clinging to what I have in Jesus Christ. And I hope that's beginning to take place. And I really hope what's happening inside your groups, some of you will begin to talk about that journey, how that's happened for you, how you've left an area in your life and what you've found in relationship with Jesus Christ. And that's going to be really, really a strength for other people inside the group. And again, we keep coming back to this issue. This is where learning takes place. Learning really takes place inside community as we share our stories, and you've developed some trust with those folks in your group, and I think it's going to give you an opportunity to really share what God has done in your life, and it's going to be a blessing to somebody else. It's going to help us all to take a stand for Jesus Christ.